We all had that friend that like when they start to engage in activities that we don't necessarily condone, but that's our friend. So you got to ride for your friend. But
Mm-hmm.
then in the Black community, you will hear the inevitable and important question: What's up with your man's?
Mm-hmm.
And you, right? What's up with your man's? What's going on with your man's?
Mm-hmm.
And if ain't nothing going on with your man's, or if there's something crazy going on with your man's, you just like, and that's what we're seeing from Republicans right now. Like,
Right.
it's hard for them to justify what's going on with their man's.
I'm joined now by Dr. Jonathan Collins, political science professor at Columbia University. Dr. Collins, it's so good to have you back as always. Welcome back to the latest word on Black News.
Pleasure, Miss Jones. Thank you for having me back.
Yes, we have so much to talk about as we always do, especially because the country right now is really pretty much in disarray. Like the United States, as we know it, is pretty much unrecognizable. Our country is
Mhm.
under attack by its own government. And some of the latest headlines right now, the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago have sued the Trump administration to stop the deployment of the National Guard. We know that the Trump administration has continued to send the National Guard into cities across the country. And then, really, the Trump administration is also blaming the Democrats for the government shutdown. Lots to unpack today, like I just said. And on top of that, Trump is proposing to bail out another country while our folks here are struggling. Let's take a listen to this clip real quick.
So stupid Trump shut down the government to make you pay more for health care. Let me tell you what this is really about. You see, every year there's money from Washington that goes towards making sure your health care premiums don't go up a lot more. That money came through Obama, Trump's first term, and Biden's term. But now all of a sudden Trump says he wants to get rid of them for the rest of your life. I want to say that again. Forever. So first he raised your prices with these stupid tariffs, and now energy's high, groceries high, everything's high. And now on top of all that, he wants to make healthcare higher. Wait, there's more. He's doing this at a time in which he's literally giving Argentina $20 billion to go fund their healthcare. $20 billion for Argentina, no money for Americans. These people have lost their mind.
So, as he said, these folks have lost their mind. That was Isaiah Martin. He's running for Houston's 18th congressional district. And, running for, a district, obviously he's paying attention to all these things that are happening across the country. He mentioned groceries being high, healthcare being high, all of the things that you and I, Dr. Collins, can feel it right now. Tell me your thoughts about what he just said.
Well, he's painting a pretty accurate picture of what's happening. Sort of, but I think there's a few additional lines to be filled in here. So, you know, you, America is in a crisis both financially and politically. Obviously, the tariffs have had negative effects on consumer costs, but these things were high before, right? And the most important thing is not just the fact that everything costs more and that we've been in this inflation period for so long. The bigger issue is like where we are headed. And I don't know if you're a young Jeezy fan, Brittany, but one of my favorite albums, Recession, right?
Mm,
Uh, I think that's the concern here is that we are headed into not just a moment of economic crisis, but we are headed to a deep um, period of economic regression or recession, where people are going to be losing jobs.
mm,
Not only are the costs are going to continue to be high, but people are going to start to lose assets. You remember the last time we had a recession that made Jeezy make that album? It was
mhm.
because the worst part of the financial recession that we had in 2007, 2008 was the fact that Black households were pretty much impacted by three times the amount as the average American household. So you're talking about people losing their homes, the most valuable assets that they have. You're talking about wealth that it took generations to accumulate,
Build.
despite the effects of institutionalized racism. We're talking about redlining. We're talking about urban divestment. Everything that Black families have to overcome in order to gain assets and wealth in this country. a- at least a third of that was just wiped away immediately from a recession. And so we're staring at this again. And not only are we staring at an economic recession, we're staring at heading into an economic recession in a period where we may not have basic support from our government to have access to healthcare. And so, yeah, this is really, really terrifying. And so I think, the video just scratches the surface.
Yeah, and I do remember that album. And I remember it was back when I was in college and everybody was
Had some
bumping it
slaps.
loud. Yeah. But it also was very true to what we're experiencing, just like you said, like right now. And so speaking of which, Dr. Collins, like to that point, isn't this kind of like anti-Trump rhetoric if he's deciding to say, I want to bail out Argentina, for instance, and it's like right here at home, we're already struggling. You just talked about like those black households feeling the impacts of it. What do you think about Trump, him as being Trump, President Trump, saying that he wants to be able to give money out to a whole nother country when back here at home, we are already experiencing the worst of times?
Well, on its surface, it's not a bad plan. It's just when you
Mhm.
start to look at it in totality, that's where it gets uh, suspicious. And so the idea of supporting other countries through investment is not a bad idea, right? It's like it's we all have neighbors, and
Mhm.
if we see a neighbor experiencing hardship, it, even if we ourselves are experiencing hardship, that's not an excuse not to help your neighbor, right? The issue is what happens if you're only helping a certain neighbor, right? And what happens if you deny requests to help other neighbors that are struggling significantly more than the neighbor you decided to help, right? That's the issue here. It's that Trump looked at all of these countries that just so happen to be populated by Black people and brown people and called them bleep hole countries. And one of the first things he did when he assumed office this go around was to slash USAID funding, which is basically the US's main way of contributing um, foreign investment funds to support like anti-poverty relief efforts in different countries around the world. But he slashes this funding and pretty much guts this program. He's been very critical of some of the poorest countries in the world. He's denied immigration access to people coming from those countries. But then on top of that, now you make this major investment in Argentina, a country that already is in the top 30, I believe, in the world in its GDP. So this
Mhm.
is not a country that is statistically in dire straits here. If anything, you have to wonder how much is this just like politically motivated? Is this Trump essentially looking to align with a political ally who is willing to engage in similar types of conservatism and similar types of anti-immigration stances that Trump has championed? Is he trying to form essentially a a new world order that is pushing back against uh, what Trump calls the woke movement,
Mhm.
and this growing rise in people supporting socialist ideas? And so again, if it were just about helping a neighbor, I can roll with that. The issue here is that this seems like an olive branch to form a political alliance that actually reinforces the removal of the rights of everyday citizens.
Yeah, and even some of his own party right now are saying like this is
Mhm,
not necessarily a good move because they feel like it is politically motivated at this point.
mhm.
So, talking about things that are happening back at home, the shutdown, we have been experiencing that. And, devastating enough for Black America. More than 300,000 Black women have been pushed out of the workforce in recent months. Everybody has been talking about it. You've seen the reports, and many of which who have families, single parent households, are right now struggling too. As a Black man, when you hear that story and you heard those headlines, how did that impact you? And what did that make you feel like in terms of what this country is doing when it comes to making sure that we have jobs or don't have jobs at this point?
Well, Miss Jones, you remember the Black Panther movie,
Hmm.
and you remember the famous fight scene And when Killmonger is on the verge of victory, do you remember what he turns around and says to the Wakandans? Is this your king?
Mm.
Is this your king? That's how I feel in response to what's happening right now and all those headlines that you mentioned. Because Trump didn't disguise any of this. We knew this was coming. We we knew there was going to be a shrinking of the federal government. We knew that we were going to lose access to things like healthcare. We knew that the plan for growing the economy sounded suspicious at best. It was something that we should be dubious of. And these were all things that Kamala Harris warned us about on the campaign trail. And so, you know, now we're seeing the plan unravel. It hasn't even been a year. It hasn't even
No,
been a year. It hasn't even been a year. And there are hardly any signs of economic growth. If anything, we've seen signs that Black Americans and particularly Black women are being hurt by the shrinking of government. Black Americans, especially the Black middle class, has relied on federal jobs. The federal government was one of the first areas of industry in the U.S. to integrate and to
mm,
offer um, you know like respectable jobs to Black Americans, and so that pipeline is being completely shut off. Not only that you see that the push to sort of criminalize DEI. This is created barriers to entry in places like colleges and universities, places like where I work, and corporations. Fortune 500 companies are now firing Black folks, and all in the name of anti DEI. And so none of this is a surprise, though. We all saw this coming. The Project 2025 document was readily available on the internet. A quick Google search gets you there. And so all we can really say at this point, as we see our democracy being beaten and battered by this killmonger, is this your king?
well, yeah, that's deep right there because it really does just make you think like low key, like, are we in a dictatorship? Like, that's literally what it feels like. And you've heard, both sides of both parties actually pointing to that they didn't necessarily, like you said, we saw this coming. Most of us did, but some of them either they're pretending or some of them just wanted to ignore that this
Mhm,
was,
mhm.
was not going to happen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. We all had that friend that, like, when they start to engage in activities that we don't necessarily condone, but that's our friend. So you got to ride for your friend. But
hmm
then in the Black community, you will hear the inevitable and important question: What's up with your man's?
hmm
And you, right? What's up with your man's? What's going on with your man's?
hmm
And if ain't nothing going on with your man's, or if there's something crazy going on with your man's, you just like, and that's what we're seeing from Republicans right now. Like,
right.
it's hard for them to justify what's going on with their man's, and,
Yeah,
and it's going to continue to
absolutely.
be so for the next year plus. Well, 3 years plus.
3 years plus, yeah.
Mhm,
And to that point too, even on top of that, we have the issues with immigration. So switching gears
mhm,
a bit, what we're seeing in the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago, they have sued the Trump administration to stop the deployment of the National Guard. So let's talk about this ICE raid that happened at a
mhm,
Chicago apartment complex. It was where 37 people were detained, families actually terrorized, children zip tied, which is absolutely heartbreaking to see. You're a
mhm.
father, you're holding your baby girl right now, and you have you're a father, you're a husband to your wife and two beautiful children. Imagine you being pulled away and torn away from your kids in the middle of the night. Just your response to what you just saw.
Well, it breaks your heart because the one thing that you want to do as a father is make sure that your family is safe. And when you're forcefully removed in that way, um, the thing that immediately creeps into your mind is a huge seed of doubt as to whether or not you now have the ability to do that to keep your family safe. Right? Like you're not even thinking about what's happening to you. You're thinking about, well, you know, where's my wife? Where are my kids? Where's my family? Um, and you're thinking about, you know, th here's the thing, when these ICE agents are entering, whether it's public spaces or even private homes, the job for them ends after that night or that small episode. But when you're minding your business and your door gets kicked through and these people are yelling at you, they're holding guns, they're pinning you down, they're strapping you up, they're hauling you away against your will, they're giving you no information on why this is happening. This is a moment that sticks with you for the rest of your life. We talk about trauma. These are the moments that create that. And so it's the indignity, it's the inhumanity of it that, makes this sickening. And again, it's the fact that these moments don't just go away. There's no men in black pen that you could flash and these folks are gonna just forget that this moment ever happened. It's gonna stick with them for the rest of their lives. It's trauma that could potentially be passed down across generations. Right. And so, you know, this is a serious problem. And I know that there are battles happening in the court system to figure out the legality around it. And I hope we can get some closure on it sooner than later because this is disgusting.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to see. And it's just like, even listening to the neighbors who are like, oh my gosh, like I was distraught just seeing this happen because I think people see it on TV, but it doesn't become real to you until it's in your neighborhood and you're getting
Mhm.
to experience what that looks like. So we also want to ask you this because all of these things kind of bring us to a point of, like I said before, feeling very much like a dictatorship. And I want you to take a look at this picture and just pause before you even respond to it, because I'm pretty sure this will speak to you in a certain way when you see that. Obviously, it says same S, different hat. What's your thoughts about this? Just let it marinate for a second.
It's a reminder that democracy, and especially a multiracial democracy, is something that must constantly be fought for. Um, you know, it's we're in this moment where, Black history has been under attack, and there's been this attempt to erase, Black Americans' contributions to this country and particularly to the construction of democracy and American democracy's responsibility or obligation to us as citizens. And, we it's a reminder that we can't get so caught up in only fighting the preservation of the history because we need a lot of energy to continue to fight for the sort of sustainability and really like the continued progression of democracy. That's what you kind of you have to sort of think about when you see that image. The time changes, the numbers on the calendar, those years change, but some of the tactics don't. And and unless we treat democracy as something that has to be constantly maintained and stretched and improved, then you know, the darker days might be ahead of us instead of behind us.
And that is definitely sad to hear, but it is honestly so true.
Well,
And
you
this
showed me the
obvious,
image.
yeah,
You
yeah.
showed me that's like wow, like clan hood. I mean, you know, that's arguably the deepest symbol of American hatred is a Ku Klux Klan outfit. You know, so when you see that. the idea that there are people whose fundamental ideology is committed to your non-existence, that hurts.
Mhm. Exactly, Dr. Collins. And this is why making your voice heard is so important. And with that, let's hear this very short message.
Are you ready to own your voice, amplify your story, and show up powerfully in media and on stage? At Be Free Communications and Consulting, we help purpose driven professionals like physicians, educators, and community leaders turn their expertise into impact. Be Free offers media training, PR strategy, and storytelling workshops designed to give you confidence and clarity every time you speak. Don't miss another opportunity. Work with us today and learn how to make your message unforgettable. Visit BeFreeCommunications.com to get started.
Now, Dr. Collins, this is exactly why voting with intention is so critical, why people have to pay attention when they are going to the ballot box. So during elections, people often put their prejudices ahead of their own interests, and we're seeing that actually play out in real life. So how do you actually reverse this way of thinking?
Well, you know, honestly, it starts with a radical shift in how we view representative democracy. Um, you know, what we've been so adamant about forcing our way onto the kind of political battlefield to even be able to play the game, that I don't think we've given enough attention to the need to change the rules. And so, political campaigns, I think, are by design. The way in which our democracy, our representative democracy at the federal level, in particular, federal and state levels, the way that they operate now, it's designed for the politics that we're getting. It's designed for people to lead with their ideology. It's because campaigning is all about who can give you the simplest message that can sow the seed of the smallest idea that could shape whether or not you vote and who you vote for. It's not designed to educate you about candidates' positions and to know, what's best not only for me individually but for the country as a whole. And I think until we start to really be more intentional about changing the rules of like how campaigning works, thinking about representative structure, there's been a growing movement for you know, changing from these kind of winner take all districts, congressional districts, to proportional representation that would allow for, more representatives within districts and a plurality of representation across districts. Because when you see this in Europe and parts of Latin America, these are places that when you see proportional representation, you see minority parties having significantly more power and influence. You see campaigning that is more about informing and engaging people to be a part of a process of self-governing, as opposed to how can we figure out how to beat up on the other candidate and make this as muddy and nasty and disgusting as possible. And so, you know, because when the politics are nasty, when the politics are divisive, when ideology is at the front, Black Americans, we lose the most. Because you know who's demonized in that process? It's always us. It's it's when Dukakis loses, I think it was in '88 because of the Willie Horton ad, when America is shown this image of this predatory, violent Black man. It's you know Clinton in the '90s promoting the crime bill and the idea of the super predator. It's Reagan in the '80s promoting these images of Black women as welfare queens. Whenever we have these very divisive, polarizing, oversimplistic, nasty, disgusting politics, we are the villains. We are made out to be the villains. And so I think it's long overdue for us to be thinking about changing a lot of the rules to the game.
And talk about that when particularly the rules are you vote whatever your party lines are, right? But how do voters actually, how can they deconstruct their candidates regardless of political affiliation so that they're really voting for the best person for the job and not necessarily just voting for that? Because you got to be intentional when you show up to these ballot boxes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I still want to emphasize the rule change because as long as money has influence on politics, you're going to see
Mhm,
candidates that are much quicker to go to a small rooftop soiree with the wine glasses swirling and the fancy cheeses
mhm,
because they know the high money donors are going to be there, as opposed to actually being in the community, knocking on doors and connecting with everyday voters. And so I still think, the rules of the game are important. But then, from there, what do we do until we see some major, election reform? From there, it's about, moving forward with the understanding that, hey, these politicians, they work for us. We
mhm,
pay their salary. We're not here to treat them like celebrities. We're not here to adore them. We're here to hold them accountable and make sure that they do their job. And it's up to us to not only be participatory, but we got to organize amongst ourselves and we need to be clear about what our demands are. You know, what are the true needs of not just the Black community, but specific Black communities across this country? What are the most pressing needs? And how do we make sure that we are coordinated and consistent in having conversations that politicians, Black and non-Black, are forced to hear and respond to?
mhm. And as President Obama once said, community organizing is a strong answer when it comes to being able to do that. So, Dr. Collins, as always, we thank you for your time and weighing in on such an important or many important subjects. And we know that unfortunately, there's many more to come.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Always love being in conversation with you.